Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. Looks like my Wi-Fi is lagging a little bit, so hopefully we can get that issue under wraps. But my name is Steven. I am your host, here to talk ball and talk about the Chargers' moves in free agency with my guys Tyler and Alex. Tyler, we'll start with you. I saw you went back and did some tumbling, or are preparing to do some tumbling. How was that?
Yeah, tomorrow I'll go try out some gymnastics, do some flips, do some handsprings, which I have not done for 2 years since the pandemic started, and I haven't actually done as a gymnast since I was 11. So that's about 15 years ago. So it's going to be it'll be an experience for sure. If I'm not on the show on Wednesday, it's because I died. So nice seeing all of you. Thanks for your comments.
Yeah, I've been there. Every time I go and play basketball with my friends again, my knees and my shoot me in the face. So I totally get that. Alex is here as well. Alex, how are you doing? And Super Bowl champion 99 on the Rams. What's up with that?
Yeah, Urban Meyer doesn't know who Aaron Donald is, and that's like the funniest thing I've ever heard. I can't imagine Urban Meyer being like, "Who's that 12 guy on the Buccaneers? He seems like he's a big deal." But yeah, no. Steven said he's never been happier to be wrong on someone like Urban Meyer, and I was like, I've never been happier to be right, but I didn't think I'd be this right.
No, I don't think anybody thought that they would go as poorly as it did. I saw somebody responded to that story from The Athletic, and I guess Urban like walked into practice and didn't know who Davon Hamilton was, and Hamilton played for Urban at Ohio State. And he was like, "Who's this defensive tackle? Like, I don't know who you are." And it was like, "Dude, he played for you at Ohio State. You don't know who he is? Come on." Anyways, so I feel like we've talked enough about Urban Meyer, but it's all good. So we're gonna talk about a lot of the free agency moves that the Chargers have made. We'll do some updates on the recent moves, including signing J.K. Scott, which everybody was very happy about getting a punter. And we'll do some free agency grades today. Obviously, the free agency period is still going. Still have a couple needs, and we'll talk about that as we go. But we'll put a nice little bow on free agency. And, of course, we'll start that conversation with our discussion about the Chargers' decision to sign Gerald Everett, the tight end from the Seattle Seahawks, formerly of the Los Angeles Rams. And Everett coming over on a 2-year, $12 million deal with upside for more to replace Jared Cook, which I know a lot of people were really skeptical about happening again and potentially him returning. And that was me included, given how the free agency landscape was panning out. So, Alex, we'll start with you. Your first thoughts on the Chargers' decision to sign Gerald Everett.
So I got the news a little bit later than everybody else did, but I saw it an hour later on my phone, and I was just like, "It's Gerald Everett. It's a tight end." But the more I thought about it, the more I actually was kind of excited about it. And we talked about Jared Cook. I just thought it was untenable, kind of bringing him back with his drop rate, and the fact that Jared Cook cannot block at this stage in his career, and Gerald Everett is. Unironically, not that I'm saying he's Antonio Gates, but is the best blocking tight end the Chargers have had since him. Hunter Henry was a pretty average blocker. And now they don't have to carry 4 tight ends and a fullback because their first tight end can't block, which was kind of a problem last year. You also look at drop rate. Gerald Everett does have some kind of drop issues for his career. I think it's 7.4%. Jared Cook is 9.8 for his career. But Jared Cook was more around 13% drop rate last year, Everett around 5.9. So you are getting an upgrade there as well. But ultimately what everyone's kind of been talking about is the yak, and Jared Cook is 34 years old. Not quite sure how much those knees work anymore. Had a couple yak plays. I guess his big yak play was actually called back on that penalty. But aside from that, I like that this Gerald Everett signing quite a bit. I think it kind of injects some, fusion of youth into this team. And I also kind of like that it's a 2-year deal too. And that they have a lot of flexibility going forward, depending on what they want to do. If they really think Parham can become a tight end 1, then, you still have the potential to do that in the future. If you think that Gerald Everett, might need to be the guy next year, then that's fine. Or you can go to the draft, McKitty, whatever. This is kind of a signing that keeps them tied down for now, but also, frees up some flexibility and roster flexibility as well, since, Gerald Everett can block. I'm really impressed with this signing. I thought it was pretty good value for what it was worth, and they basically got him for the same average annual value cost that they got Jared Cook for last year. So I'm kind of thrilled with this one.
Yeah, like Alex, the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. And it was getting a little bit scary at the end there, where it was basically Ferkser, Cook, or Everett. And we figured it was going to be Everett or Cook at that point. But yeah, they signed Everett, and I was pretty happy with that. And the more I dug into it, the more I really liked it. I mean, we look at Jared Cook last year, some of the issues the Chargers had on top of the interceptions that Herbert would throw, trying to throw to Jared Cook, was also Cook just not being able to be much of a weapon over the middle. And Cook caught only 58% of his passes over the middle this past season. Gerald Everett, the past 2 seasons, 86%, 84%. Now, Cook had more volume there, but still the percentage obviously favors Everett in that regard. And I love going back and looking at the composite rankings to see what kind of value did you get here for Everett. And if you have Uzama right ahead, just one spot ahead of Everett in those per play basis rankings, but he's $2 million more per year. You just go one down further and get Everett. I think that's fantastic. You find someone, the whole point, I think really the focus of their offseason was to find guys that are young-ish enough or have more in the tank, but will be better with the Chargers. And I think tight end, more than any position, maybe outside of wide receiver, has the most room to get better. So if you find someone like Everett, who is just behind Uzama, but even ahead of guys like Gesicki on our rankings, and you pair him with Justin Herbert, you take that per play basis, that's pretty solid. I think he was 7th on our rankings, and you give him just more plays and more volume, and that's going to go up. He is more likely to outperform his contract than someone like CJ Uzama, in my opinion. So, like Alex talked about, you do get a better blocker. Jared Cook was 11th in pass blocking efficiency among the free agent tight ends that we have that were available. Everett was 5th, and I don't have any way to quantify Everett's run blocking grade, but Cook was, Pro Football Focus run blocking grade 11th. Then Everett, you get 7th. You get, instead of 2 missed tackles forced from Cook, you get 11 from Gerald Everett. Just everything. You can go down the list of everything, and there's just either a small bump or a big jump you get from Everett ahead of Cook. So I'm really happy with this. I think it's a solid deal. I think you get good value from it. To me, like if everybody has a my guys in this draft sort of thing, in terms of everything put together, I think this signing in particular is like my signing. This is like my favorite signing in terms of the value and the potential and what is needed and the upgrade over the replacement, or over the previous person. This is my favorite signing, I think, honestly, in terms of everything taken in. Now, yes, JC Jackson, Khalil Mack, there's going to be much more high-end players, but all things considered, I think Everett, in terms of value, is my favorite signing.
Yeah, I think, there's a bunch of things to hit on here that you guys are mentioning. And of course, have to give a shout out to Tyler's mom in the chat with a super chat, talking about Tyler's gymnastic ability.
Tyler Biles out here.
Yeah, Tyler's got all those medals from back in the gymnastics heyday, so I believe it. So yeah, a lot to hit on there. And I think, that general philosophy that the Chargers have had in this free agency period, and going back to last year, really since Brandon Staley has taken over, is that they're aiming to find players who are hitting their stride at this specific moment and this specific time to give them kind of that runway to, out hit that value. And I think that's a really smart approach to free agency in general. I think if you look at all these teams who use free agency the right way to build up their team, they're not going out and throwing a ton of money at the most expensive guy. They're not throwing out a ton of money on aging veterans. They're trying to get that balance of youth and upside and value. And I think the Chargers have done a really good job in that in general. And I think this signing of Gerald Everett is another indication of that. And so I think if you're looking at the way that the Chargers have kind of used their tight end position last year with the Joe Lombardi offense, I think you have that big slot receiver that they're kind of aiming for. You have that kind of receiver slash blocker, and then you have your blocker slash receiver, and then of course the hybrid H-back position. So that's kind of the 4 roles that I've been able to kind of learn about with this Saints based offense. And Gerald Everett obviously comes in and can play that big slot role, but like Alex mentioned, I don't necessarily think he's like a great blocker, but he is a functional blocker, which is, a big difference with what you had in Jared Cook, who, the times that he did line up in line, it was like shocking when he did actually go and block because he's just not good at it. So I think with Gerald Everett now, you can have a lot of flexibility there. He can perform in the combo block scheme that they like to do, along with Donald Parham. What are you guys laughing at right now?
No, I laughed at Tyler calling UCI University of Chinese Immigrants.
Oh, I have heard that same comment before. I just didn't notice it. But yeah, I think with Gerald Everett, you have a third functional blocking tight end, and Alex is talking about not having to keep four. Like maybe we do see Trey McKitty's role kind of expand a little bit more into that H-back kind of position, and they just kind of roll with these three. Obviously, Gabe Neighbors is on the roster. I don't think any of us really expect that for long. Then you have Hunter Kampmoyer as well, who will challenge for a training camp position. But I like this tight end room a lot, man. You get a really good receiving upside in Everett. You get Parham, who we know can be a huge red zone threat, and the McKitty has some of that juice as well. So I think this tight end room is really rounding into shape.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Watching just brief film of Gerald Everett, you could tell that a lot of what the Chargers tried to do last year, sort of similar concepts. I think the Chargers would do more pre-snap motion with the tight ends and then out to the flat, but they'd have Donald Parham block somebody and then release to the flat, or that what's the freaking thing called? They leak. Oh, leak. Thank you. Jeez Louise. Yes, you'd have them do something like that, and you could see not quite the same plays, but the same kind of concepts with Everett. So I could see them doing that. Having not saying Parham is McKitty, but Parham being like ready to go McKitty, and then Everett is just Parham ready to go, and then McKitty is just going to be Anderson. So I could see that working out for sure.
And I think this just gives them a lot more versatility as well. I think you look at Gerald Everett's stat sheet, and you see a couple of handoffs, you see a couple of rushing touchdowns, and he was kind of the Rams end around guy that they would use on occasion. So I think this is generally a really good signing, and I think maybe my favorite thing is something that Tyler pointed out on Twitter yesterday. It's just like the mentality that Everett plays with. I think what the biggest issue with Jared Cook is just kind of the lapses in his mentality, and just like the lack of consistent effort and motor. And at least from what I can see from Tyler sharing this on Twitter, is that's not really an issue with Everett. I think he's going to give his every single inch that he can to try and get yards and get yards after catch and be able to be that consistent guy, that consistent chain mover. So I think that's something I'm looking forward to as well.
Yeah, and I think also Gerald Everett has experience not giving up on routes, because Russell Wilson will make you not give up on routes because he'll make you run for 15 seconds straight with how he plays. So I don't think we'll have to question any of those motor issues or giving up on route issues here with Gerald Everett. But no, like Tyler said, I kind of thought of the signing as meh, just because maybe we expected it. But the more I thought about it based on value, I don't know if I call it my favorite signing of free agency. I think J.C. Jackson ranks slightly higher, but it's one of the top tier ones based on what the Chargers could get at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And just watching, I know people, as soon as Gerald Everett was signed, everyone went to YouTube, downloaded the YouTube highlight video, then posted it on Twitter like it was their own or something. But everyone was talking about how this guy runs mean and he runs angry. I'm like, okay, that's the highlights. But going through, like, he unnecessarily, even potentially, lowers his shoulder to try to drive past guys, even going out of bounds. He really is just a physical presence that the Chargers just didn't have in Jared Cook last season. So I can't wait to see him pair with the Chargers. He can catch the ball. He fights for more yards. He fights through the entire play. I think it's a perfect signing.
Yeah, and I keep going back to that comment from Brandon Staley at the combine where he, was saying that he wants more speed on the offense, that he wants to be able to kind of open things up vertically. And I think this is a really good way of doing it. Not to say that Jared Cook wasn't fast or anything. I think that was kind of his specialty, was kind of working the seams and stretching the field that way. But I think with Gerald Everett and his speed, you can work the field in different ways. I mentioned the end around thing, and I think this just gives the Chargers that little bit of a boost that they didn't necessarily have last year. And I'm not going to go as far as to say like this, transforms the tight end room or transforms the offense or anything like that. But I think it's a really good signing, and I think this does, kind of elevate them at least to an extent.
Yeah, one of the things they were talking about, even with Josh Palmer running the league, is you want a guy out there who can block or can do this, but maybe sneak something else in there. And Gerald Everett, his story is amazing. He started as a 3-year basketball player in high school, and then I think he switched to another school, And then they didn't have room for him on the basketball team. So like, I don't know, do you want this guy to play football? And he ended up playing wide receiver, and then for 1 year, and then went to college and obviously was drafted very highly and did, obviously made a career for himself. But the wide receiver tendencies are there. They're just some things that he does where you can get him to, run routes very well, to fool defenses, but then also play a tight end, and then also blocks. Where you can do a lot more with him. You can fool the defense a lot more than you can with Jared Cook.
Sorry, I stopped listening after you said he played basketball in high school. I was sold after that. If he played basketball, he's good.
That's the Chargers' stamp of approval right there.
The real question is if he played basketball at the University of South Alabama. That's the real test for a
might be a tiebreaker.
No, but I do think this is a really good signing, and I think we were all really excited about Donald Parham and Trey McKitty and their developments, but I think the way that the Chargers have kind of acted this offseason is that they really wanted that veteran tight end presence in front of those two players. And, as much as we do like Parham, like they did place a tender on him. They didn't do an extension. And I think if they really believed that he was a true tight end one at this point, then they would have given him an extension. So this kind of accomplishes a lot of different things. And I think really, this probably was their target from all along, given the connection to the coaching staff and given the scheme familiarity and really just kind of the overall fit for this player.
Yeah, I agree. I think we can certainly add the Rams to the Bears and the Broncos as that pipeline for this team, sort of the Packers, but I feel like that's an old regime thing. So we don't have the contract details for him, right? We don't know if there's like an out in 2023 or whatever. No,
nothing specific yet. Yeah, we just have the total contract numbers. I imagine we get like the specific cap hits and things like that. Probably down the road. But given their past, I would imagine there's at least some kind of out next year. It being a 2-year deal, maybe they save kind of like $2-3 million or something if they cut him.
It's so interesting because you have Parham. What's the rules on tenders? So he got tendered this year, obviously. Can you do that again next year?
No, I think next year
once.
he would have because he has to have 3 accrued seasons or something. So 2020 would have been his first, 2021 would have been his second, then 2022 would be his third. So I think then he would be an unrestricted free agent next year. Not totally sure on that though.
Okay. Yeah, and I was just trying to figure out like how Parham's developed kind of ties in with Gerald Everett. Like you kind of might have a 1A, 1B. You can keep both, obviously. I was just curious, if you have an out here, what do they do with Parham? If they can't tender him, what do they do next year? But story for another time.
Yeah, I was gonna look it up, but being slow right now.
I think it is the 3 accrued seasons thing, and then he's unrestricted, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know. That is an interesting thing. I've kind of been talking with some people on social media about kind of like the next year's cap situation, and obviously, we're just barely getting started on this season, but it is something to keep in mind. And I think, if Donald Parham kind of reaches his ceiling, and of course, the concussion taken away 4 games, basically 4, because he got hurt on like the 3rd play of the game. He was on pace for like 270 yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns. So next year, if he gets 406 touchdowns or something like that, I kind of have to think that he would need to be back and then, be that long-term option with Trey McKitty going forward.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
All right. Well, it's time to talk about punters because the Chargers have signed J.K. Scott, formerly of the University of Alabama, Green Bay Packers, and last year Jacksonville Jaguars. So, we were messaging back and forth about this and kind of what it means for the Chargers and really, is it an upgrade? Is it a long-term solution? And I think the one thing for certain right now, in my opinion, is that this, ensures that Ty Long is not going to be returning. Of course, they did not tender him. They elected not to do that. So signing J.K. Scott makes a lot of sense from a connection standpoint. Obviously, Ryan Ficken got to watch him for 3 years within the division. And this is I had to laugh at how Tyler pointed this out because this feels like, upgrading from Storm Norton to like Billy Turner of the punter version. I think, they just get a functional, capable punter. And I think hang time is really the key here. He was number 2 in 2019 and number 1 in 2020, excuse me. in terms of hang time. The PFF grade is really good. I don't know if he's necessarily a big upgrade over Ty Long, but I think that really is just kind of they're looking for a functional punter, maybe get some competition down the road. But I think this is a fine signing depending on kind of what it costs yet. We haven't really seen that, but it is definitely something worth talking about.
I would certainly love to not reset the punter market with this guy like we did with Harris, but yeah, like I said, it's an upgrade. It seems to be some sort of upgrade. I talked to Mike Kawana, who was on the show before, talking about Packers free agents, and he said, some of the struggles were sort of weather based. So the Chargers playing in SoFi is fantastic. Maybe you have Kansas City be a problem, or the Bills or whatever. But for the most part, I think you're okay there. So they have a body. I think the whole point about not having to take Ariza in the 4th round, like half of our feed wants to, is fantastic. I would have maybe reached in the 5th round, but to me that was a 6th round thing all the way, and maybe it still could be, but at least I hope this at least puts that to bed for now. I say that saying I hope it's going to happen, but I know it doesn't matter. Everyone in the chat's going to be talking about Ariza in the 4th, 5th, whatever. But look, there's a body, and it seems to be an upgrade over Ty Long. I believe in the EPA, punter, however the hell they calculate that. He was a few spots up from where the Chargers were, so I'll take it.
Yeah, I don't have too many reactions other than he seems okay, and is kind of an upgrade over Ty Long, but also not really. Also, hang time doesn't necessarily matter if we don't have good special teams tackling, so less Devontae Harris special teams tackles out there, please. Hopefully Ryan Ficken gets that situated. But yeah, I mean, conspiracy theory, does Brandon Staley only want subpar punters so then he can justify going for it on 4th down every time? Because that's kind of what this signing reeks of. But no, I mean, I think he'll be okay. And I probably don't think they're done adding, training camp competition. Like in general, I wouldn't be surprised if they go get probably not a Ariza, but someone who's like an undrafted free agent coming out of the draft. There's always the possibility, in theory, they could re-sign Ty Long to like some kind of training camp deal. Lachlan Edwards exists, and I don't know, whatever they want to do in punter market. But yeah, it seems like Ficken's kind of cleaning house outside, with everyone outside of Hopkins. So I don't think those things will happen. But J.K. Scott seems okay. Bringing competition for him. See how it shakes out in the preseason, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think signing J.K. Scott precludes them from, drafting a punter necessarily or taking an undrafted free agent swing. I still think that's possible. I mean, they have 3 7th round picks or whatever it is. So they can afford to use one of those on a punter and bring in some competition. But like Tyler, I do think this definitely takes the chance of Matt Ariza in the 4th round off the table, which most likely was not going to happen anyway. Using a 4th round pick on a punter is not really something that this team can afford to do with all of the depth questions that are on this roster. They don't have a 2nd round pick. So yeah, I mean, I'm on the same page. Hopefully this doesn't it kind of discourages that comment in our chat these days.
It won't.
But yeah, it's a slight upgrade, serviceable punter, and I think that's fine for now. I do. They'll add competition. They'll add a second body. Just a matter of when. So a couple super chats in here. We'll get to some of those right now. Kind of leading into the next question here from Adrian and our next topic. Assuming we bring back O'Day and sign our RT in free agency, what would y'all feel most comfortable doing in 1st round, trading back into late 1st or maybe even 2nd round, or wide receiver, DT, CB, or edge at 17?
Wide receiver.
I feel like being contrarian. So aside from trading back, like I would want to trade back, get something. There are options there for the Chargers to trade back, sure. If I had to sit at 17, it would definitely depend on who's there. But I really feel like if there's an edge there, I would love to go that route because it's so barren behind the Chargers. Like the Chargers still did have a good offense with Jalen Guyton as wide receiver 3, not really because of Jalen Guyton, but they can make it work. I think going from, Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, who are great as your starters, but if the drive is 12 plays long, they'll rotate out on that first drive and they won't be there on the second drive. That's just how Brandon Staley did it last year. And so your next group to be Emeka Egbule, who dated my sister, and Chris Rumph, like, like I don't really see. He sucks,
You say that like it's a negative.
It is a negative.
Oh my
I just
gosh.
that's not a good rotation. I don't want them to experiment with Kenneth Murray as edge
Right.
3. It's will edge 3 see the field a lot? Maybe not, but I'd rather them, have an edge 3 that's legitimate. And honestly, I don't want to say it's a when Mack or Bosa get hurt versus if, but it kind of feels like there's going to be a game or two where that Bosa misses, that Mack misses. You got to have a better edge 3 back there than whatever's out there in free agency right now, or whoever you take in the 3rd round, or Chris Rumph. I believe in Chris Rumph in year 3. The idea of taking I'm sorry, but one of the least productive rookie edge rushers in the league last year, and making him your starting edge 3, you bring Joey Bosa in, and it's Chris Rumph on the outside. I just don't know if I buy into that right now. They need to find an edge 3. So that's my long-winded way of saying that edge 3. But now we're down to Ojabo, so who knows who's going to be there.
Well, that's kind of the wild card, man. Like we were talking about kind of long shot scenarios on Saturday during our Q&A, and like if you're sitting there at 17 and you're staring down, taking a guard or taking, Devontae Wyatt and David Ojabo is there, like I think that could be a scenario worth exploring. I mean, obviously I'm on the same page. I want a reliable edge 3. I was kind of talking myself into Kyler Fackrell returning today, and then of course the bastard had to go sign with the Raiders and continue the former Chargers pipeline over there. Shout out to Kyler, love him, but I do want a reliable edge 3. But like if Ojabo is there at 17, and you can, you have an environment with Mack and Bosa where you can kind of take a chance on that guy. I think just kind of depends who's there, obviously, but like, my thing lately has been like, okay, if Jameson Williams is off the board, then where are you pivoting? And I think my ideal scenario is trading back in that instance, but obviously that depends on who's there, what quarterbacks are there, or whatever. But if you're sitting there at 17 with David Ojabo on the board, and it seems like he's going to be there, I think that really is a scenario worth kind of exploring and taking a chance on. I know he tore his Achilles. I know that's, long-term injury, but the upside of Ojabo at 17 versus, whatever else is there, I think I would still lean Ojabo in that instance.
Yeah, I definitely like that call. What is Ojabo's outlook at this point, though, like for the season?
So, traditionally, I know Cam Akers had, the 6-month recovery from his Achilles, which was just kind of a freak accident. I think, generally speaking, you're looking at like 8 months minimum. So he tears his Achilles in March. That would put him potentially back on the field in December for the stretch run, maybe. So again, you'd still have to make another move at edge to kind of, find another player somewhere. But again, like if you're asking me to draft David Ojabo or, Zion Johnson, the offensive guard, or, Bernard Raymond, like I think I would rather have Ojabo at that point.
Yeah, I don't see them taking an edge at 17. I think that because they carry forward and because they have Bosa and Mack, I think that they're going to get some Vigil or Fackrell kind of signing. I brought up Carl Nassib today, and that would fit the white, traditional edge 3 that they would kind of need there. I don't know. Tack McKinley is available. He tore his Achilles, though, as Steven told me today. I had no idea he did. So kind of in the same basket, kind of the same problem there. But I think it would be tough to pass on Ojabo. But if he's not going to be back to November and December, and you kind of need players now, I think that's kind of a tough sell for me, unfortunately.
Sure.
I would probably go with wide receiver, or they could still go cornerback, which I don't think J.C. Jackson takes that off the board completely, given the future of Michael Davis is pretty uncertain at this point, in terms of the long term. So I would probably say wide receiver, cornerback. I get the edge thing. I just think they're probably going to go with someone that's more rotational. If the Mack trade hadn't happened and, Nwosu was back, I think that would probably be the more edge at 17 spot.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And we'll cover all of those different scenarios once we get closer to the draft. Zach Pearson with another super chat question. been a fan of the show since day one. Thank you for that. And he says, thank you for the nonstop content. Do you guys have a second favorite NFL team or a player you wish the Chargers had? I know Tyler loves Cox. That's actually Alex. Alex loves Fletcher Cox. I do not have a second.
I like Fletch.
Yeah, he likes Fletch. Alex likes the Eagles as well, growing up in Philadelphia. And then Tyler and I just have the one team. We just have the one Chargers.
Do I? I feel like I partially root for the Raiders as well.
Raiders.
I'm a closet Raiders fan. No, I support my father's team when they're on and not playing the Chargers. So yes, I do root for them, but when it's appropriate.
When it's appropriate only, yeah. All right, so that scenario, obviously, talking about right tackle leads us into the next topic that we're going to cover today, and this was one that Daniel Popper brought up, which was the possibility of the Chargers kicking Matt Feiler, the left guard that they signed last year, over to right tackle, kind of stabilize that position. It is something that the Chargers have kind of highlighted in terms of his flexibility and that past resume that he has from the Pittsburgh Steelers days of playing tackle and guard. Obviously the Chargers have a big need right now. There still are some quality veterans, I feel like, out there. Billy Turner, but I think this is a scenario we're talking about because, the Chargers have talked about it themselves, moving Matt Feiler over to the right tackle position. Tyler, what are your thoughts here about potentially moving Matt Feiler to the right tackle?
We talked about, I think, the last episode or the episode prior about, hey, we have a new set of offensive line coaches, or one offensive line coach, the main one. I can't remember his name. And so, potentially, there are things that could happen that didn't happen last year. Hymas, again, starting. Hymas, I doubt he'd play right tackle. But Feiler also moving to right tackle. And last year that's our backup emergency option, but it's not going to be our main option. But this year, that could change. And to me, putting someone you've developed like Hymas at guard or taking a guard at 17 and putting Feiler at right tackle, I think does make a lot of sense. I would trust Feiler out there over, Raymond, over Penning at this point. I'm curious, though, when he signed with the Chargers last year, he signed as a guard. And I don't know, did the NFL and the market just assume that he was a guard? Do they view him better as a guard? Because I'm sure if he could get starting right tackle money elsewhere, he probably would have. But he played left guard for the Chargers and was signed to play left guard for the Chargers and was not their priority option to play right tackle. So I just feel like if the league kind of hinted that that's how they feel about him and the Chargers paid him and are paying him to play left guard, I still think they're going to keep him there. So my preferred option at 17, outside of the the free agents, obviously, I think I'd rather go with like a Kenyon Green or something like that. Try him at right tackle, kick him to right guard if Odebushi leaves the following year and whatnot. I just, as much as I think Feiler to right tackle does make some sense, I get the arguments for keeping him at left guard, and there are some strong arguments for it. And I do think that's what they end up doing.
Yeah. Just to clarify here, Tyler is 100% a Chargers fan. He is a season ticket holder for the Chargers. His dad just happens to be a Raiders fan. So Tyler spends thousands and thousands of dollars being a Chargers season ticket holder and has been the case for 10 years now. So Tyler's a Chargers fan through and through.
Okay, but please redirect your angry drunk rants to him instead of me this time. I'll take that for one day. As far as Feiler at right tackle, I think they could do it. I mean, in theory, it makes sense if you're going to bring Ibushi back, and kind of like filter around with the offensive line there. I do kind of think the fact that they signed him to play guard for 3 years, I mean, I don't know if there would need to be a renegotiation on his contract necessarily, but this isn't what he signed up for, right? To play right tackle. So I think it's probably more likely at this point that they probably sign like a free agent that can kind of stabilize the group. I still think that's going to happen, whether that's Billy Turner or like a high end free agent per se, or high end of what's left. I don't think that could range, but I still think they'll probably get a guy for right tackle. If they don't, I mean, I think that increases the likelihood Feiler would go to right tackle, but I still think there's some problems there. I don't think they'll wait till the draft, though, because that would be that would be kind of a nightmare with Storm Norton still being penciled in as the right tackle until then, which would put a lot of pressure on the Chargers. We'll talk about Storm Norton a little bit later, as Tyler will go off on him. But no, I think in theory it sounds good, and the way that someone like Daniel Popper explained it on Twitter, like it all makes sense. I just don't know if it makes financial sense for Matt Feiler, which is kind of why I don't think it would happen. Could go that way, but I think it's probably more likely that they get someone like an Ibushi back to play right guard, and then still get like a depth, right tackle option who's an upgrade over Norton.
Yeah, quick shout out to Adrian doing another super chat. Really appreciate that. Yeah, I think the money, like money talks, right? Like money is telling us what these teams think of these players. And so you give a 3-year, $20 million contract to Matt Feiler. That's good, middle tier guard money. That's barely more money than Penei Sewell makes as a rookie right tackle. So if they really viewed him as a right tackle, like if there was any chance in their mind that Matt Feiler was going to come in here and play right tackle after Brian Bulaga leaves, then I feel like they would have had to kick up that contract at least like $3 or $4 million, get him to 10. And that just obviously didn't happen. So I do believe that if they were to kick him to right tackle, they would have to rework his contract. It doesn't make any sense for Matt Feiler to move over to right tackle, making guard money. So, that's a dicey contract situation. I do think, from Feiler's perspective and kind of what the numbers say, that the pressures and the pass blocking efficiency from his right tackle days in Pittsburgh and his left guard days in Pittsburgh are nearly identical. And, frankly, it's the same kind of thing with his left guard play from last year. But the biggest difference from his performance with the Chargers and his performances with the Steelers is that he really improved as a run blocker last season and set a career high in run blocking grade. I know that that's not necessarily the end all be all in terms of evaluation, but you're sitting here watching him at tape, and him and Corey Linsley and Rashawn Slater just have such a good chemistry between the three of them. And you really see that on film. You really see that in those combo blocks and in their scoop blocks and everything like that. So I think from a financial perspective, it doesn't really make sense for Matt Feiler. And I'm not into the whole idea of like swapping players around to plug one hole, but also creating another hole while doing it. So, could Matt Feiler stabilize the right tackle position? Yeah, sure. I think he's would definitely an upgrade over Storm Norton. He's probably in that same kind of tackle range as the players who are on the market. But then you have questions at both guard spots instead of just the right tackle and right guard. So I think it's just creates more questions for me. And I can't really see the Chargers being into that idea just based off of how they operated last year. Like if they could have put Matt Feiler ever at right tackle several times throughout last season, and they never did. And they always cited like, we don't want to create more holes by trying to plug one other hole. So I can't really see this happening. It's a fun scenario, and I think Matt Feiler can do it in a pinch. But I'm not necessarily going into this offseason with Matt Feiler being my right tackle as like my plan A here.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing. If they didn't do it last year when Storm Norton was getting gashed by Crosby and Parsons, why would they do it now when Storm Norton's going to do the same thing? Right. So, like, I just don't think there's added extra motivation for them if they didn't do it this year or last year, I should say. I don't think they would do it this year either.
Yeah, I agree. And again, Brendan Heimlich could be great, but we saw Matt Feiler leave for one game, and it was a disaster that ruined the Denver game for Justin Herbert. And I guess in theory, you'd probably rather have a stronger interior than tackles. I know that's not quite how it works, but I'd rather kind of sacrifice right tackle, or at least just get an average guy there than, guess at left guard. And then it turns out to be a huge problem. As far as his contract goes, like, where do you think he would be as if he hit the free agency market with Lyle Collins and Morgan Moses? Would he be what, right tackle 2, 3, maybe? Just looking at the contracts, because Morgan Moses did sign for $5 million APY and Collins for somehow only 10 APY. So him being at 7 and switching over to right tackle, I do think he should have been paid more, but based on this right tackle market, like none of these guys are really getting paid all that much. So I think the money could kind of work out if they want to look at it that way.
Yeah, I think the Collins thing makes no sense to me, right? Because there's a $7 million gap between him and the next highest paid tackle, and I'd rather have La'el Collins than Taylor Moton, man. Like that just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know if that was just him, only having eyes for Cincinnati. Is Alex still frozen for you? Alex, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't know if I'm frozen, but I hope you can hear my voice.
Okay, I got your voice, but your screen is frozen. So, yeah, the La'el Collins thing is interesting to me because from a financial standpoint, Alex is not frozen anymore. All right, cool. From a financial standpoint, La'el Collins signing for the exact same amount makes no sense to me at all. So, I'm curious to know kind of what happens there. I would think that Feiler would make more money than Morgan Moses purely just based off of age and based off of recent tape. And Alec Morgan Moses did kind of play a stable amount of games, but I don't think he was necessarily like a good tackle. I think he was a fine, serviceable tackle. So I would think that Feiler probably would sign for more in like the $9 million range if he does get kicked to the right tackle at this point. But I could be off base there.
Yeah, I think he's at 7 per year right now, so not too far. If it would be between Collins and Moses, which is okay, but yeah, I could see him being bumped up a little bit more. He's got 2 years left on his deal, right? So I don't know if an extension would really be in the works, but again, I don't think this is going to happen. But just trying to look at the money. Someone said Sands heavy. Get out.
Speaking of a player who is coming off a torn Achilles, apparently that's the theme for the day.
Yeah, I don't know why we're still doing that with Achilles and ACLs, but try to stay away from them.
Yeah. So, obviously this does, lead to like what, we've talked a bunch about the solutions here. And I know there's still a lot of people who are like, oh, they're just going to run it back with Storm Norton, right? I'd be shocked if Storm Norton were the starting right tackle next year. It might be Trey Pipkins, but I'm pretty positive that it's not going to be Storm Norton. I think you can look at, again, the money always tells us what these teams think of these players. And, Joe Noteboom obviously had, similar circumstances. At least I think he's better, and I think he showed better. But if there was any doubt in the Rams' mind that Noteboom was not a starter, they would have given him a small deal, 1-year deal or something like that, and they gave him a 3-year $40 million contract. Storm Norton signs for the tender, which pays him less than $1 million. If there was any chance that the Chargers thought that Storm Norton was a starting caliber tackle, he's not signing for less than $1 million. So again, I would be pretty shocked if Storm Norton were starting on day 1 next year for the Chargers.
Yeah, look, I just we talked about the most hyped games last season, and we were talking about like, oh, there could be a Sunday night football between the Chargers and the Raiders. Does Tom Telesco want it on his conscience of the abuse that man could take week 1 Sunday night football, Crosby versus Norton? I don't think he does. I don't think he's a masochist quite in that way. So, you can't go into the season with that. If he's your second or third tackle, fine. But no, he cannot be the starting right tackle.
I totally don't think it'll happen, but I've watched Phillip Rivers in week 1 have Trent Scott, Sam Tebby, Michael Schofield, Dan Feeney, and some left. Oh, I think it was Mike Pouncey at center. For about 4 games block for him. So I don't think it'll happen with this regime. I don't think Staley will allow it. With that said, they allowed it for 17 games last season as well. And they were completely fine with that. So I don't think they'll do it again. They let Chris Harris Jr. have the whole year, took care of that. Like the Cook have the whole year, took care of that. So I do think they can move on. I think they will. I'm manifesting it.
I just got PTSD hearing the name Trent Scott. Like that.
That was great. That was awesome. I really loved that era of Rivers' career.
I had a great time going through Pro Football Focus today, going through the 2017, 18, 19 offensive tackle play for the Chargers. It was just so much fun after, Joe Barksdale gets injured, what kind of happened to that freaking right tackle position for the team. So it was great. I think at the very minimum, very, very minimum, it would be Trey Pipkins over Storm Norton. I would be shocked if Storm Norton were the starting tackle next year.
Yeah, I think it is Trey Pipkins. And I think it could be Trey Pipkins and certainly over Storm Norton. I don't know. I really don't know. This would be something really scary to bet on. Is how I feel about this whole situation. Like, would Trey Pipkins be the right tackle? No, but I would really have a hard time betting on that.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing too. Is like we know that Tom Telesco likes Trey Pipkins, right? Like we know that, but we don't really know that Brandon Staley believes in Trey Pipkins either. Because I mean, he loses his job to Storm Norton to start as swing tackle, right?
Mm-hmm.
He starts out the season as the jumbo package tackle. Then he loses that job. And then he starts 2 games, right? And like, he plays well in those 2 games. He does. He improves. He shows improvement. But even then, he didn't go back to being the jumbo package offensive lineman. Like, he still had that job lost. So I don't think we know that Brandon Staley believes in Trey Pipkins' ability to be a tackle either. Like, I'd be pretty surprised again if either of these 2 players are starting, next year for this team at right tackle. To me, as James points out, I think Billy Turner is kind of the best option at this point. I didn't know this, but he was top 10 in. I didn't know this until today. He was top 10 in ESPN's pass block win rate each of the last 2 seasons for the Packers, and only allowed 64 total pressures over the last 2 seasons for them. So contrast that to the 125 combined pressures from the Chargers right tackles over the last 2 years. So that was a fun statistic to look up.
Do we still have that whole underdog fantasy thing? Are we still doing that? Or the underdog gambling? So if we are still doing that, I have an idea. If Tyler's disaster scenario comes true and Storm Norton is the right tackle starting week 1, we should hedge it, put like $100 on it, and just in case it happens, we win. But we would lose the game. But
Right.
I think that we should put something on it just so we don't get our spirits too depressed.
No, what I would do is if we had $100 still to bet on that, and if Norton became the starting right tackle, I'd wait for the Raiders game and smash the shit out of the over on Max Crosby's pressures.
Oh, that would be the way to go about it. Yeah.
Someone in the chat said that Billy Turner is in LA today. Is that accurate?
I have no idea. I don't know.
But they could certainly attack things in the draft, but just based off of what we're hearing, that doesn't really sound like a viable solution, barring a trade up. So we'll discuss those options down the road. But again, any truth to the Chargers being interested in Sony Michel? You guys seen anything about that?
Go ahead and guess it's an NFL rumors thing.
NFL Rums or Pro Football Network has to be that one.
But John, if you do have a link to where that would be posted or whatever.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll talk about that. Obviously, I think we're in favor of them adding a running back. So, all right, let's wrap the show up today. We'll talk about some free agency grades. Obviously, the Chargers have signed several free agents, and we can include Khalil Mack in here as well. And let's start with Khalil Mack. What kind of? I only trust NFL rumors and ball sack sports. Yeah. All right. Let's start with Khalil Mack. Tyler, what kind of grade are you giving the Chargers for the trade for Khalil Mack after having 10 days or so to sit on it?
Yeah. Okay. Because there are some question marks, I can't give it an A. I'm gonna give it a B plus, which sounds mean. I think this has the potential for the highest possible ceiling for any of these acquisitions. I think he obviously can just become a top 3 edge rusher again, and that would be amazing. But they did give up a 2nd-round pick. They are upgrading over a player in Mosu that I did like. It's not like they got Vita Vea for a second, and that's a significant upgrade over Jerry Tillery. I think Nwosu was solid, but they did upgrade over Mac, or over Nwosu, and Mac's a fantastic player. But you lose that 2nd-round pick. There are some injury concerns. The cap hit over the next 2 years is like $27 million or whatever. So, and unfortunately, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Love the player. I think he'll be absolutely fantastic. But because they did lose on draft capital, which is the nature of a trade, duh. But it's a very expensive move for sure. It's a bit risky considering the injuries. Again, I think this is the most potential to be an A plus thing when we look back at this. But considering just some of the question marks, I'm giving it a B plus.
I think that's totally fair, and I do agree with kind of the B plus range, and I think it would be kind of in that A minus range for me if they didn't restructure him. Like, I know that they freed up some cap space and they're going to need that, but taking him from a $17 million cap hit next year to 27 over the next 2 years, I think that it was a little puzzling for me. And so I'm a big believer in what Khalil Mack is going to bring to this team. I think I've said several times his run defense is a very underrated aspect of this trade and what he's able to do for this team in that regard, be that tone setter. But I'm a little confused, I guess, by kind of why you restructure him and not Joey Bosa or not Keenan Allen, who probably have a higher chance of, playing out their current contracts. But, I think there is some health risk as well with Khalil Mack. I'm not going to say like a ton, but frankly, Joey Bosa has a higher risk of getting injured, I think, than Khalil Mack does. But I think the upside here is ridiculously high. And I think at minimum, the Chargers are getting a very, very, very good player that obviously they are familiar with. So I agree. I'll give it a B+.
I'll go A-. I mean, I always thought that the edge, I would have liked Uchenna and Nwosu to be back, but I also just always felt like they needed more, and they ended up getting more. Maybe that was going to be another player in free agency. They could have taken a run at Von Miller or something like that at some point, but they decided before free agency even started, we're going to go get our guy. And to be honest, like a year ago, prior to his injury, I don't think anyone would have balked at trading a first round pick for Khalil Mack. Like, to be honest, So I get it. It's a second and a sixth. The second is particularly difficult to give up. But at the same time, they keep their first round pick and get a guy that can rebound pretty quickly into being a top 5 edge rusher. And so for me, the restructure thing I do get, which is probably why it's more of an A- than an A for me,
Sure.
given his cap hit in later years and just the fact that he's getting up there in age. But for me, the upgrade over in Nwosu, the fact that Joey Bosa cannot be, quadruple teamed anymore, like I think all that stuff's great. And, of course, now we'll talk about Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson and these free agent grids, but they're now kind of beefing up that interior too. And Jerry Tillery. But I think just having Bosa, Mack, that kind of reinvigorated interior, and all that kind of kicked off with the Mack move. So for me, I go A-. I get why some would go, the tough Asian grading scale with the B+. But I do think that it was a good move.
No, definitely a great move. I think this checks a lot of boxes there. So, we'll move on to JC Jackson, obviously signing a 5-year. What was the final number? Wasn't it like 85? 5-year 85?
I know it's 16.5 per year. I forget the final number. I would say 82.5.
It's 82.5. Yeah.
82.5. All right.
Yes.
There we go. Nice. So, obviously the Chargers had a huge need at corner. So, and they get, 16.5 for JC Jackson is a freaking steal. He's got an $8 million cap hit this season. So I'm going to give this an A-. I do have some questions again, just kind of why I guess Bill Belichick is letting a player like this leave. I know that's kind of silly of me to say at this point, but it is just something that kind of lingers in the back of my head. So the Chargers get a great player, very productive player. I think this is very close to a home run, especially getting at that 16.5 APY. So I'm going to give the JC Jackson signing an A-.
I'm going to go with an A here. Very happy with this one. Mostly the contract really does sell in the end. We hear talks of 20 to 22. And even though Arjun and Brad Spielberger, who are just on the money with their cap predictions or their contract predictions, even they were thinking 18, nothing lower than 18. So 16.5 for arguably the biggest name on the entire free agent market and certainly the biggest corner name. And to be able to not just replace, I guess Michael Davis is CB1, but Chris Harris Jr. as your slot corner with Asante Samuel Jr. and how he affects everything. The interceptions to allow more for the offense, more opportunities for the offense, just being a better corner to allow them to get off the field on third down. I just think it's such a great move, and the contract is fantastic. And I just love that the Chargers did something, even like with the Mack trade, just did something a little bit different. They would have not done this before, but they did something a little bit different. And I like the process of how they got here. Does it pay off in the end? I don't know, but I do like that they took a chance on a guy who was cleared of everything off the field, and they went for it. They swung here. They don't usually do that, and so just almost for that reason alone, I'll give them a good grade. But overall, I'm going to give this an A.
I also concur. I would give it an A here too. This Staley defense just like bluntly does not work without a true CB1. Like we could kind of talk ourselves into another year of Michael Davis in that role. We could talk ourselves into Charvarius Ward, which I wouldn't have minded if they went in that direction. But to me,
Sure.
they needed a true like alpha corner. They needed a guy who's going to get turnovers. And I don't think it works without it. I think that the Staley defense kind of needs their Jalen Ramsey, so to speak. And so they got it here. We talked about the contract, which still seems like kind of a ridiculous steal. He's only like the 6th highest paid defensive back in the sport. Obviously, there were some off the field questions and why he didn't reset that market, but for the value the Chargers got and just how important he is to the Staley defense, the fact that he's going to be forcing these turnovers and allows Michael Davis to kind of take a secondary role in the secondary to him. I think that that's really important. Obviously, they still kind of need more corners. I would like a little bit of depth there. Steven talks about CB4 and free agency. Still wouldn't mind that. But for what JC Jackson is, I was really impressed by the signing and think that it's an A. They got their guy in the defense.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree that this is a great signing, 100%. I still honestly I still am just kind of shocked that they did go and make this move, right? Because this is just a move that we haven't seen the Chargers make ever. I think Khalil Mack is obviously another one of those things. So great deal all around. All right, Sebastian Joseph Day comes over from the Rams, 3 years, $24 million. Come over to replace Linval Joseph or Justin Jones, however you kind of want to look at that. Tyler, what are your or actually let's start with Alex on this one. Alex, grade for Sebastian Joseph Day.
A+. He went to Rutgers. I'm gonna go with a. I kind of range between a B+ and an A- here. I'll go with a B+. I think that it's a really good signing. Whichever role they kind of envision him taking, whether it's more that Linval role, whether it's more that Justin Jones role. I actually don't really think he kind of falls into either one of those categories. I think he's sort of his own thing, but obviously was having a great season in LA prior to the injury. And I think that, what he's going to bring to this team in terms of, one of the best run stoppers in the league. And then they got one of the top 10 also analytically best run stoppers in Austin Johnson next. It's just such an upgrade over what they had before. And I think that the contract works out pretty well too. It's a 3-year, $24 million deal. You could debate whether that's a little high or a little low, but to me, that's kind of on the low end, in terms of what the other DTs got on this market. I guess Ogunjobi didn't end up getting that big deal because then he failed his physical, but they were prepared to give him, $10 million per year. So the fact that you got someone like Sebastian Joseph Day for 8, I think really does kind of sit well with me. But yeah, no, I'll go B+ for the signing.
100% behind you there. B+ for me as well for all the same reasons. The Chargers, again, it depends on who you think he's replacing. I think people are kind of back and forth. Is it Joseph? Is it Jones? Regardless, he is significantly better. They needed a run stopper. He's the best free agent guy available. He's only behind Braden Fajoko run stop rate in the entire league last year. And so I think going from, I have it somewhere. I think Joseph was 30th in run stop rate. You go to first, or you go to second, I should say, in the entire league. I think that's the way to go. I think, as Alex pointed out, you get him for a little bit less than some of the other guys. 10. Every defensive tackle seemed to be getting 10. Joseph Day got 8, and I think that's fantastic. If he were completely healthy the entire year, and he played the entire year, and there's no injury concern, he's not coming off an injury, I think it's an A easily. But because there's an injury there, that's it. That's really the only reason I'm giving it a B+. It's just because he didn't finish the season. Well, sort of.
Yeah, Sebastian Joseph Day, I think, he was my number one run stuffing defensive tackle target for sure. And the Chargers were able to get him at really good value. Lorenzo Fatukasi gets $10 million per year. DJ Jones gets $10 million per year. Sebastian Joseph Day comes in at 8. So I think he's going to fill a fantastic role for this team. He's going to play a variety of different spots. I do think he does at least start in base downs as kind of that nose tackle player. That's kind of what he did for the Rams for the most part. He does have that versatility to play across the line and play in different spots. So I think that's kind of where we'll see him start, but not a great pass rusher by any means. So it's hard for me to get to like a true A. There is something there, and I'm going to do a film breakdown here in the next day or so. It's kind of highlight some of that, but he was my number one target in terms of defensive tackles. He was the guy I wanted most to pair, with whoever they get, just kind of be that run stuffing, solid defensive presence. And I think B+ sounds fair for there.
Nice. Look at us.
There we go. All right. Next move the Chargers make, obviously, is Austin Johnson comes in at 2 years, $14 million. So Sebastian Joseph Day gets 8. Austin Johnson gets 7. And, this is a really good signing for me as well. So I'll start this one off. I'm going to go with a B here for Austin Johnson. Don't necessarily think he provides the same kind of production as Sebastian Joseph Day, but again, just a really solid player up front that the Chargers needed, and being able to, plug a hole with a player who doesn't necessarily have a crazy high ceiling, but his floor is just really, really high. So really good value. $7 million per year for a defensive tackle is very good. I think Justin Jones comes in lower than that for the Chicago Bears as that Larry Ogunjobi replacement. So Austin Johnson for me, somebody that I really advocated for at the trade deadline, somebody that I wanted on this team just because, again, really, really solid player. So this is gets a solid grade at a B for me.
I like it. I will give it a B as well. I think Justin Jones got 6 per year. Johnson gets 7 per year. And for just the low price of $1 million more per year, you get, you go from 60th in run stop rate to 16th. And you do lose a bit of that pass rush productivity for sure. But again, you get JC Jackson to help with your coverage, and then Khalil Mack as your edge rusher. You make up for it in that way as well. And yes, Jerry Tillery can sort of rush the passer. So you get, a much better run defender, and you get a very, very healthy player. And the Chargers just didn't have that last year in Justin Jones. I think he was fine against the run, but again, I think people have this different perception of what Justin Jones was watching him versus what he actually ended up being on the stat sheet. I was so surprised when you put that list together, and Jones was like 80 or 60th or whatever it was in run stop rate. Just like, I was just surprised. So them going to someone who was, I think 16th if you filter for 100 run snaps, that's fantastic. So super healthy. They didn't have that in Jones. A much better run defender, and just a slight bump down in pass rush productivity. Just a slight bump from Justin Jones for only $1 million more. That's pretty good. The only reason I don't give it a higher one is just because a higher grade is just because Arjun seemed to suggest it was a bit expensive for a player like that. Like they could have maybe had him for less, and I kind of buy that. So not a high ceiling player by any means, but like you said, that floor is fantastic. So I really like this signing too.
Yeah, I concur with the B there. I think that I guess they did overpay a little bit for Austin Johnson, but then they kind of underpaid a little bit for Sebastian Joseph Day, which is what Arjun seemed to insinuate. So I guess that kind of evens out. But no, I mean, they're getting a pretty reliable run defender. They're getting, a guy that can just kind of stabilize the middle there. And I did think it was funny that the episode I was off on last week on Wednesday, I saw a comment that did say Tyler said Jerry Tillery can sort of rush the passer, which made me laugh. But I think that Austin Johnson is just a good signing, very much kind of in the vein of a high floor guy that, they sort of probably knew Justin Jones was walking. So you kind of replace him with an Austin Johnson. And I think he'll be solid here. I have no real concerns with him at all. The PFF grades, like if you're wanting to nitpick, aren't the greatest, but I mean, shit, he also played on the Giants. And the Giants defensive line was not anything to write home about last year. So for me, I concur with the B. I think he'll fit in really nicely with Sebastian Joseph Day, and he's got help on the edges now, certainly with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. So I'll go B.
Yeah, I think that's obviously we're all on the same page there. I think he's just a really solid player, which is better than they have been dealing with. And I think him and Sebastian Joseph Day really just give you two players who can, play a variety of roles along the defensive line and be able to play the nose, play the 3-tech, play the 5-tech, and just have those two quality run stuffers on the field at the same time is going to pay dividends for them. So we went a little longer than on the other conversations than I thought we would. Do we want to grade the tenders and the re-signs? Or
oh yeah, bring it on, dude. Let's do it.
All right, we'll move on to Josh Harris, officially the league's highest paid long snapper by like $100,000 or whatever the case may be. But former Pro Bowl long snapper for the Atlanta Falcons coming over. Watched his video introduction today. Just very, very Southern. Seems like a very kind soul guy. Surprised he kind of moved over to Los Angeles, but 4-year deal for a long snapper. Tyler or Alex, let's start with you on this one. Thoughts on the long snapper contract?
I mean, I guess that the highest paid long snapper still isn't expensive. But this signing is a little bit weird. I mean, if Ryan Ficken really just wants all of his guys, I'm fine with that, I guess. And that seems to be kind of what they're doing at the punter spot. And they did it with long snapper, and they made a big play. I can't tell you what goes into analyzing long snappers. I don't think any of us are going to be doing a film breakdown on Josh Harris, but yeah, it's a good signing. They have a long snapper. If they feel confident that he can actually play at a Pro Bowl level at long snapping, then fine. But yeah, it was a bit of a peculiar signing to me. But I'm fine if this is how they want to rebuild it. And, he's not particularly expensive still at, $1 million a year, basically, even if that is a bit pricey, I guess, in comparison to Overton and some of the guys that they've had in the past, like Mazza. But I'm fine with it. And, like James said in the chat, and like I said earlier, they're probably not going to be punting a lot anyway. But then it's like, okay, why would you go get the highest paid long snapper in the league if you're not punting a lot? But I don't know. I feel mixed on this one. C.
If you're gonna go get a punter, or excuse me, a long snapper, you might as well get the highest graded long snapper in the league. According to Pro Football Focus, he has a grade of 83.6, which makes him the highest graded long snapper. If it prevents, Overton was $990,000, so I think like $400,000 more to get Josh Harris for a long, period of time. If $400,000 extra means we're not going to have a punt blocked or whatever, and that our kicker is going to transform into Young Hui Koo or something, that's fantastic. Josh Harris has 28 career tackles, which is just 3 fewer than Kenneth Murray had last season.
Oh! Ow!
Oh my gosh.
I would also imagine 28 is like 3 points lower than Jerry Tillery's PFF run defense grade.
Jeez. Kenneth Murray and Jerry Tillery always cats and strays. Yeah, when Arjun said that they made him the highest paid long snapper, I was kind of taken aback, but I mean, Ryan Ficken seems to have his guys, and he has a vision, and we knew that he was going to be involved in the roster process. So I'll give it a C plus. I mean, it's a freaking long snapper. Like, the guy seems really cool, and it was a need, but I don't really know. I mean, like, he was a Pro Bowler last year, but he wasn't a Pro Bowler before that. So I'll give it a C plus just for TBD. All right, we mentioned Gerald Everett earlier. I feel like this is going to be another, kind of higher grade for each of us. Obviously coming over from the Seahawks. Google says Murray had 31 combined tackles. Wikipedia says Harris has 28. That's hilarious. All right, Gerald Everett coming over from the Seahawks and the Rams. I'm going to give this a B. I'm going to give it a solid B again. I don't think he's necessarily a huge upgrade over Jared Cook, but I do think he's going to bring some stability. Little higher upside, obviously brings the youth, more speed. Don't think this is necessarily a transformational signing, but I'll give it a B. Good contract again, $6 million APY. It seems to be really good value. So I'll give it a solid B.
Don't know who we're starting with. Okay, it's me. But okay. I'll go A minus. Sort of what Tyler talked about earlier. It's not someone that's like, oh man, this is like a superstar player per se, but the value they got him at, also the value just he brings to the team as someone who can both receive and block. Haven't had a tight end that can do both of those things in a while as a starter. And so, for me, I think that makes this a good signing. One of the better yak guys on the team already, behind Austin Eckler and some of those other guys. So he adds a layer to this offense that I think is just was much needed after the whole Jared Cook experience, which I'm happy is over now. So
Yes, very
and
much
you
so.
really got him for the same price you got Jared Cook last year. They gave him 1 year, 4.5 guaranteed, 6 million total, and they kind of have given they've given Everett the same deal just for 2 years. He brings stability there. You still have flexibility on the roster. You have flexibility in the draft, whatever you want to do with Parham. But this is a guy who's still young, and you really upgraded for the same price. So I'm going to give it an A-.
Yeah, I can't wait for the clip outs where I give this a higher grade than a Khalil Mack trade, but I'm going to go with A- for Gerald Everett. Not
There we
because I
go.
think he's a better player than Khalil Mack or by any means. He certainly won't move the needle as much, but like all the reasons I said before, good value, a clear upgrade, good contract, A- for me.
There we go. Lots of questions, obviously, and we'll see. I do think the Chargers will make some other moves, obviously, and I'd be pretty surprised if it were a big name. I think it's going to be a lot of value signings, but we'll see how that one goes. All right, the Chargers obviously re-signing Dustin Hopkins to a 3-year deal. I forget exactly how much money it was worth, but I think this is a good signing as well. Tyler, great for the Dustin Hopkins decision.
How do I give like an obvious, like it's such an obvious move that they had to make? How do I give that? I mean, an A, I guess. Like it's the only move they had to make. Like there wasn't a kicker out there that was better. I don't know how his contract compares to other kickers, but like that was their best option. I guess it's an A because you did like if the question is easy, but you have the right answer, it's an A. So to me, you get an A. There you go.
Yeah, I guess like that's where we're at with Dustin Hopkins. He was really good last year. Missed a couple field goals, but ultimately was really high in terms of his percentage. The question with him, I guess, is always going to be long distance. But I mean, look, we were having kickers who could not make extra points or field goals from 40 yards for a while. So
Yeah.
if you miss a 50-yarder once in a while, I'm not going to come too far after you. It's weird to call it a 3-year deal. I mean, everybody kind of knows that kickers in this league function from year to year, and I feel like that's the reality with Dustin Hopkins as well. As much as the Chargers did just extend him, if he starts missing field goals, they'll cut him. If he is making all of his field goals, they'll keep him. And so to me, it's just such a volatile position and volatile performance from year to year. But Dustin Hopkins has been one of the more consistent guys at 80+% every year. So I don't foresee those issues with him, but he is also a little bit older. So you never know that, decline could theoretically come. But I'm fine with Dustin Hopkins getting extended, but calling it a 3-year contract when it's really year to year, I'll B+.
Yeah, I think B is kind of where I land here again because like what's the alternative? But also like I feel like they could do better. But I mean
Yeah.
Hopkins was 18 for 20 with the Chargers and really, if he didn't miss that one against the Raiders, like, we're talking about a 19 for 20 season, like that's freaking amazing for the Chargers, right? So I'm a little iffy on the contract being 3 years, but that probably was his market. And again, this was the one guy that Ficken wanted back. So I think we're kind of wait and see in general on special teams. All right, well, we'll speed this up a little bit. Christian Covington, obviously back on a 1-year deal. I mentioned him earlier. I think this is fine, depending on what happens after this, because I think that right now he is that interior defensive lineman 4. Like he's going to play those backup level snaps and be a starter if anybody misses games. So I'd like to see them add another player capable of starting into this rotation, whether that's through the draft or maybe through another free agency signing. But as your 4th interior defensive lineman, I think Christian Covington is fine. He's going to be super cheap. The veteran minimum for him, I think, is like $1.2 million or something like that. And so I think this is fine. I'll give it a C+ until I know more. If he really is the interior defensive lineman 4, I'll keep it at a C+. But if he is the interior defensive lineman 5, then I'll probably bump it up to like a B-.
Yeah, I think I'll go B minus on this one. I don't think they're done with the defensive line room yet, whether that's free agency or just adding a guy in the draft. If Christian Covington is your ideal 5 or 6, that is fine. And I think he's very good at what he does. He's also what's his exact contract? Has that come out yet? I would imagine it's just a 1 year, $1 million deal.
It's most likely the vet minimum
Yeah.
according to Daniel Popper, which he thinks is 1.2 based
Okay.
off of his accrued seasons, but
Right.
it's not going to be
Yeah.
anything crazy.
Yeah, of course. So you look, yeah, I think there was a lot of people caught up in Covington being like subpar last year, but also Covington was asked to like play a lot,
Yeah.
especially down the stretch of the season when like Linval Joseph was hurt. Oh, this guy's got COVID, and then suddenly he was sometimes ideal 2 or 3, or sometimes a starter in
Yeah.
some of those games. So that's really the issue. I think Covington is serviceable for what he is. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a B minus, and you just kind of run it back. He has some familiarity with the system, but I would like to still see them add another guy just so he doesn't necessarily have to have that responsibility and can kind of remain as depth.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Justin Jones was hurt in the first week, so Covington had to be a
Jeez.
starter right away.
Right? Yeah.
Man, I forgot about that. C plus for me, I guess, as long as he's part of that rotation later on. Obviously, I'll feel worse about it if it does knock Fehoko off the roster. Hopefully, it
Yes.
doesn't, but there is a chance because their rules are sort of similar now that they can play all over the line. If it knocks Fehoko off the roster, I just don't agree with that. So to me, it's a C plus for now, but it would get worse if it knocks him off the roster.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get to these tender decisions. Tyler, you've been waiting all day for your chance to give the grade for the Chargers' decision to tender Storm Norton, excuse me, for a whopping price of $900,000. All right, what's your grade for that decision, Tyler?
Just to see, honestly, like at the end of the day, it really just doesn't it won't matter in the end. I think this is a complete F if he is on the roster and they've done nothing else unless Pipkins gets hurt or something. But to me, Pipkins is your OT3, Norton is a camp body. It won't matter in the end. It won't count against the cap or whatever. So I'm gonna say C because it shouldn't mean anything, but this has the chance of going to a Z if he's on the roster as their swing tackle next season.
I don't know if I'm going to be that hard on it. He's ultimately making $900,000. C plus, like that's fine.
It was barely better than what Tyler said.
I mean, we did watch the Raiders game. So yeah, I'll say that he's gonna. Yeah, I'll say C plus. He'll be OT2, OT3, I should say, behind. Not OT2 as in starting, hopefully, but I mean behind the right tackle choice. So yeah, and if he has to start because the right tackle gets hurt again, that is one of those things, as Tyler said, that could bump this down to a Z. But I'm comfortable with him, I guess, being the third or fourth guy, depending on how they want to arrange that with Pipkins. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. Rough, end of the season for him in particular. But, he does have some years in the system. And, they brought him back for pretty cheap. He's playing on the minimum. So don't really care. C plus.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a C as well. I understand the decision. I do think he's probably just a training camp body at this point. I've said all along the likely scenario to me is that they sign somebody and then they draft the highest version of the tackle group to kind of fill out that room. So I get why they would bring him back at least for training camp and be able to have that experience and that relationship with him. I like I said, I'd be shocked if he were the starter, and it just kind of feels like a formality that he's gone. So I don't. Why would you not just let him walk? I guess so. I give him a C. All right, much higher grade for me is going to be the decision to tender Jalen Guyton, the wide receiver 3 or 4, depending on who you ask. The Chargers' only speed threat from the last 2 years, thanks to the other decisions that they made. But I'm okay with them bringing Jalen Guyton back. I do think he is a fine receiver. We saw him improve. I felt like this was kind of a no-brainer in that regard because of how valuable he is. So I'll give Jalen Guyton the decision to tender him. I'll give it a B-.
I will give it a B- as well. That sounds about right. At low floor, or okay floor, low ceiling, but it's so cheap, might as well.
Yeah, I think I'll give him a B on this one.
Sure.
Ultimately, I think that it's good flexibility for him in the receiver room. Did improve, I think, a lot last year in terms of as a route runner. Wasn't just being used as just this straight go ball route guy, which I think kind of does improve what his floor is for this team as a receiver, and also bringing him back at a pretty cheap value doesn't preclude you from taking a wide receiver in the draft or signing somebody else, right? So I think that he is just going to be there to be probably your wide receiver 4, maybe your wide receiver 5, depending on how things shake out. And I'm fine with that. I'll take my grade down to a B- actually, because he called one of my questions crude in an interview.
Did he really?
I'm gonna bump my grade up because he got
A+.
Yeah, B+ for being the
Fuck
best
you.
I do think it's fine. Like I think he probably ends up being the 5th receiver on the team. Ideally, they keep 6 this year, and be able to kind of expand that room. But I think he's a fine depth receiver. I think he gets too much hate on social media, but it's all good. So Donald Parham obviously back on a tender deal as well. Officially cleared for all football duties, which was great news. Was fantastic to hear that one. I disagree with the decision to tender him, though. I would have liked to see him get a stronger deal for his development, and have them kind of show that faith in him to give him more than $900,000 or whatever the tender price is for him. So I agree with the decision to bring him back, but I'm going to give the decision to tender him a C+ as opposed to giving him a maybe like a 2-year deal or something like that.
Yeah, okay, I get that. At the time, I would have loved to give him, and I think his first deal was for 2 years, would have loved another 2 years. Obviously, now we know that Everett got that 2-year deal. Just in terms of the ceiling that you have for him, the floor that's there, and how much he's going to likely overperform the $990,000 contract or whatever it is, I'll say A-. Like, I feel good about this because he's a guy who walk in, have 400 yards and half a dozen touchdowns for a very cheap deal and be a really good tight end for this group. So I'm going to give A-.
Yeah, I can't really take off points for them using the URFA rights that they have. I mean,
Sure.
I don't think Tom Telesco is going to voluntarily pay more for a player that he knows he could pay less and get away with that.
Have you seen Chris Harris Jr.?
True too. But I mean, that seems like more of a CBA issue to me than the Chargers issue. In terms of how much he's getting paid. But yeah, no, I guess there is an argument that he'll overperform his deal next year and then be more expensive. But at the same time, it didn't seem like, I don't know. I guess that's an interesting thing with how his contract could play out. They could have, I guess, paid him more, extended him this year. But at the same time, I just feel like they kind of have made their commitment to Everett being the tight end 1, and they'll see, what Parham kind of becomes during that period, which is, I think, what his role is. But ultimately, if he's your TE2 and, can potentially develop into that, the money you're getting him for is really cheap. So I would also kind of coincide with the A-. But yeah, no, I get why they didn't extend him, but I could also see why Steven's disappointed in it. I just, they're not going to pay more money than they have to in any individual year, especially with how they were spending this year.
Right. Totally understand that. And I just wish they kind of would have expressed a little more faith in him, but it's all good. He's back on the team and he's healthy. So that's all we can really hope for. So that's gonna do it for us today. I was not expecting that show topics to last almost an hour and a half, but we were able to just keep around 400 pretty consistently throughout the stream. So shout out to all of you guys who have stuck in here for the entire 90 minutes that we've been recording. And so we'll talk about some more free agency stuff if it happens on our next episode. If not, we're going to dive back into some more of our draft topics. Little I think there's 48 days until a draft or something like that. So lots of good content coming your guys' way. So we'll catch all of you guys next time. As always, if you're listening to this, please leave a rating or review. If you are watching, please go like and subscribe to the video. We just barely hit 5,000 subscribers, so make sure you are subscribed for all of the coming months. So that's going to do it for us today, guys. We'll see you next time. Bolt up.